There's a storm brewing on the horizon. Average global temperatures are rising, and more of the sun's heat is being trapped in the atmosphere. How will this affect us? How will global climate change affect our world? And how is it changing it already?
Well, in the last 200 years, we have very strong evidence for the impact of human beings on the environment in many, many ways. Human beings, by coal burning, for the most part, have doubled the amount of sulfate in the atmosphere. And the one that most people are interested in and concerned about are the greenhouse gases. We also see that beginning with the Industrial Revolution in the mid-1800s, you begin to see carbon dioxide rise in the atmosphere. There are a number of issues that I think will be very challenging to Central America and the southern part of the United States. Big storms are an issue. If you increase the amount of energy in the atmosphere, we think that you increase the probability that you will have large Category 5 hurricanes. Now, hurricanes are complex beasts. They require not only the warm ocean to do this, but they require the right wind patterns in the atmosphere. And we may get lucky. It may be that the wind patterns are such that they don't favor big hurricanes, whereas the ocean does favor big hurricanes. So, but, you know, do you want to bet? Do you feel lucky? We expect these climate surprises to continue.
In 2007, Mexico was hit by 2 hurricanes simultaneously. Not only that, but for the first time ever, 2 Category 5 hurricanes came ashore in the same year. But that was just the beginning. In the poor southern Mexican state of Tabasco, flooding caused 700,000 people to lose their homes. Despite the fact that Tabasco had been hit by devastating floods less than 10 years ago, efforts to prepare for similar disasters sank under the weight of government corruption, overbuilding, and deforestation. In effect, the state's population was left to fend for itself.
I think the Maya have a lot of lessons for us, and one of them we talked about is where you do excessive deforestation, you affect transpiration and rainfall. They have a lot to tell us about exceeding limits of productivity and sustainability. The soil damage done to these tropical soils, at least around the Tikal area, this has been documented, soil damage was so severe that with 1,000 years of vegetative succession and regrowth of a very mature tropical rainforest, soils have yet to recover. So here's a lesson for what we're doing in the Amazon and other tropical areas today.
We've already seen what happens when large storms hit, particularly areas that are already struggling economically. You look at the floods that occurred in Tabasco. You look at, for example, who was in the Superdome during Katrina. It was not, the Lexus crowd. It was, the people who did not have the funds to get out. So there's ethical challenges there. There's economic challenges there. We have a have and have-not society already. The have-nots are the ones who are going to get clobbered by these problems. And it's not just big storms. If you have droughts that impact crop prices, if you barely are getting by in terms of food, if you don't have enough money to do that, then you hurt more than someone who has more money to buy food.
In the wake of the storm, Mexican President Felipe Calderón appeared on TV where he could be seen filling sandbags. He promised that the Mexican government was doing all that it could to help. In a nationally broadcast and slickly produced telethon, he urged Mexican citizens to donate food and water to those most affected.
Si usted no ha ayudado, dese la oportunidad de ayudar a los damnificados de Tabasco y Chiapas. Si usted no ha ayudado, dese la oportunidad de salvar una vida.
In 2008, some anonymous, probably poor person moved to a city somewhere, and with that, for the first time in human history, the majority of people in the world now live in cities. By mid-century, it is estimated that Mexico City will consist of 50 million people. This urbanization of poverty is a relatively new phenomenon, and it would no doubt be simplistic to attribute a single cause to this trend. George Grayson, a professor at William and Mary College specializing in Mexican politics, predicted that this latest disaster in Tabasco would spur a massive migration to the slums of Mexico City. One major slum on the outskirts of Mexico City that consisted of only 10,000 residents in 1957 today has over 3 million poor people. These slums, often on the most marginal land, have few if any services. A case in point is that 90% of the sewage in Latin America today is dumped untreated into waterways. So we're by an open sewer here in Mexico City, and I really wish video could convey smell because there's just an overwhelming stench that's occurring right here. Raw sewage goes right into streams and rivers, which then goes into lakes and oceans. This is the reality of lack of sanitation facilities, and this presents a public health disaster just waiting to happen. Not 20 feet away from this open sewer is this taco stand, creating yet another means for the rapid transmission of disease. Mexico City also has one of the world's largest slums of more than 4 million people, and the impossibility of containing an epidemic in that kind of community just is hard to even imagine. This is the coffee house in Mexico City where Che Guevara and Fidel Castro reputedly spent long hours planning the Cuban Revolution. Certainly in the 50 years since, the amount of human misery in the world has not decreased. The fact is, the number of people living in desperate poverty over that time has massively increased. What then is the future for the struggle for social justice? 100 years ago, Marx and Lenin based their revolution on the urban proletariat, the working class of heavy industry. 50 years after that, Mao turned this concept on its head and based the Chinese Revolution on the peasants of the countryside. Today, the fastest growing social class in the world is the economic underclass of the slums, with the largest of these, arguably, being right here in Mexico City. As the US military is currently learning in Iraq in a painful and costly lesson, traditional military machines are not particularly good at fighting in urban terrain, especially the claustrophobic terrain of urban slums. Is this then the future of social struggle? Here in the large cities of the developing world, where a great mass of economically and socially displaced people is already in place.